Welcome back to another News of the Week episode, and unfortunately, we have to start off with a bad news coming out of Sacramento, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you have already heard about this news, and I was actually thinking about making a separate video talking about this news when it was announced yesterday. But Ron Burkle, the lead investor of the Sacramento Republic expansion team in MLS, has officially pulled out of the deal, and that, in other words, he basically is now no longer the lead investor of this team and basically not going to lead this team into MLS. Now, as much as this is a very surprising news to hear, and that this is definitely a devastating blow in terms of Sacramento's future of going into MLS, there were definitely signs that troubling was brewing in terms of the Sacramento expansion hope as they were hoping to head into the league in 2023. I mentioned before a couple of months ago there was reports saying that Sacramento actually missed their window in terms of paying for the expansion fee, and Ron Burkle did not pay the expansion fee because it seemed like he didn't have enough to pay that money. And I thought that at that time maybe the reason why MLS kind of was a little bit forgiven to Sacramento for not being able to pay that expansion fee on time is mainly because of this whole COVID situation. And I thought eventually Ron Burkle was going to pay that fee, and Sacramento is going to be back in the right timeline of coming into the league in 2023. Well, it turns out, it seems like maybe Ron Burkle feels like he doesn't have enough money to, of course, paid the fee in general, and now he decided to kind of pull out of this deal. Now, at the same time, I can also understand why there's a lot of Sacramento fans not only devastating about this news, but there's got to be pure hatred toward their former lead investor right now, because Ron Burkle is kind of a guy that, he's kind of a classic example of a lot of what these owners, especially rich owners in MLS or any other owners right now in the world, that's using this COVID as a big excuse of why he can, of course, spend money. Because I remember back in January, there was actually reports that confirmed that he actually bought a property, and he actually bought Neverlands for $22 million, and it kind of feels a little bit fishy, the fact that you can basically spend millions of dollars buying a property, but you cannot afford to, of course, acquire and pay the expansion fee. Now, there's no doubt that the expansion fee is more expensive than the property that he builds, but at the same time, he's a $1 billion kind of owner, and you just feel like he is kind of being a little bit cheaped out in terms of this. But at the same time, I feel like maybe for Sacramento fans, as much as they're also pissed off that Ron Burkle is not going to lead this team into MLS, they kind of maybe be a little bit thankful that they might have dodged a bullet of an owner, where I also have heard reports that before, when he basically agreed to pay the $300 million expansion fee. Well, actually, I think it was $250 million expansion fee before. He was not happy that he has to pay that much amount of money. And any times when you have an owner that feels not happy about paying the expansion fee to kind of own an MLS team, it just makes me feel like if he was going to take charge of this team, he probably is going to be kind of like what John Fisher is with the San Jose Earthquakes, where he's kind of being a little bit of a cheap ass and just kind of not really be as ambitious as some of these expansion team or other team around MLS that is spending the big buck in terms of acquiring players. So I feel like there is a theory that if he is going to be the owner of this team, he could basically run this operation kind of similar way to how John Fisher is with the Quakes. But that being said, that's just kind of my theory of how it is, and who knows, maybe if he does stay with this team, he might actually prove me wrong by spending a lot of money and actually be one of the more ambitious owner to basically invest on the team. But there are telling signs that maybe that isn't the case, with the way that he was already not happy, the fact that he has to pay more than he thought he would in order to basically acquire this Sacramento team to expand into MLS. But regardless, I can definitely understand the frustration of Sacramento fans, and that after all these years of waiting. And I remember last year when they finally were announced that they were coming into MLS, they thought that the long year of frustration was finally ended and it was a glorious moment. But now it seemed like they're back to that long frustration and that long wait that they have been waiting for the past couple of years to have an MLS team in Sacramento. And I know MLS have said that, you know, they are working close with Mayor Daryl Steinberg in terms of trying to potentially find a new lead investor and still bring the team to Sacramento. But my biggest concern right now is that, you know, with how MLS have says that they have lost billions of dollars this previous season, and really the only way that MLS is still kind of staying afloat is because of all these expansion fee that they've been able to receive for these past couple of years, and knowing the fact that they're hungry to get some expansion fee to continue to stay afloat, because they're probably going to lose more money heading into this season, they might think about trying to look at other market. And I did a video the other day talk about the potential 31st team that is coming into MLS, that is Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Indy. I have a feeling they're probably going to look at that market and they'll probably ask them that, you know, if you are able to pay the expansion fee that of course we want you to pay, then you are going to be replacing Sacramento as that team, as the 30th MLS team. And really, I hope that of course is not going to be the case, because you always hate to see when a team that have already confirmed that they're coming to MLS and now unfortunately they've been replaced by another team because they just simply cannot pay the expansion fee, and in some way their expansion bid was canceled because of that. But I won't be surprised if MLS is not going to wait around, and that they're really desperate in terms of trying to get that expansion fee so that they can of course stay afloat after losing so much money from this past season because of COVID. But moving on, in terms of the next news, after I kind of spent a little long talking about this, there is a report suggests that Detroit is planned to have a USL club and is planning to build a new stadium. Now, this is kind of interesting because, as I also mentioned in that video talking about who most likely is going to be coming into MLS next, I said Detroit was one of those teams, but they were kind of ranked like near the bottom half of my rankings of who most likely is going to be the 31st MLS club, and a lot of that has to do with the stadium issue. And basically, MLS is not going to award a team in Detroit because of the fact that they of course are going to be playing in Ford Field. Now, with them potentially building a stadium, and I know they're probably just going to build a stadium for a USL club, I wonder, is this going to be a way where they're going to try to attract MLS again, saying that, you know, we finally fund a stadium for a USL club, and then in some way we're going to kind of go the Austin FC way, or maybe in some way like the FC Cincinnati way, where we get the USL club, we get the new stadium, and if you are going to potentially think about us awarding us an MLS franchise, we can always bring our USL club into MLS, and we can also maybe renovate that stadium to make it get much bigger and be fit enough to host MLS games. So that's kind of an interesting way of them thinking of this, and that this might be a way for them to maybe have their hope to potentially award a team in MLS. But we shall see whether or not if these reports are true that they are going to have a stadium. And I've already heard that there is report that they are going to get a USL club, but it's also depend on whether or not if they're going to build that stadium to house their USL club. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that there's already possible candidates that I have heard that could be potentially replacing Thierry Henry as the Montreal head coach, and that this was actually an article written by Greg Seltzer that talks about there was 9 possible candidates that potentially replaced Thierry Henry as the head coach of Montreal. And the one candidate that I kind of find interesting in this article is Patrick Vieira. And in some ways, it kind of makes sense that Patrick Vieira could potentially be the candidate, and maybe even the top candidate to replace Montreal, because you're basically going to be replacing a French-speaking coach with another French-speaking coach, and you're also replacing a legendary player from the French national team to another legendary player that is coming from the French national team. Now, unlike Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira has already have experience in MLS, and he has already done very well with NYCFC. So, you know, with that experience in mind, maybe that could really lead to Montreal thinking that, if we're going to try to, kind of please the fans a little bit, even though we know that they're still protesting about the rebrand that we just recently did, and that we trying to please them by replacing another legendary player, then why not Patrick Vieira coming as the head coach of Montreal? And that it just feels like it kind of makes sense that of course could happen, but we shall see whether or not if that is exactly one possibility. And again, it is still very early days in terms of Montreal looking to try to get a replacement for Thierry Henry, and I have a feeling they're trying to do it as fast as they could, because they know that as preseason is about to start, they don't want to head into preseason where they still have no head coach into their team, and that could be a really dicey thing to have if you want to prepare for the upcoming season. Now, moving on to talk about some of the signings. So we have two signings that happened in the past couple of days. First of all, we got the Red Bull signing goalkeeper Carlos Corona on loan from RB Salzburg. Apparently, I think this is a signing for them to maybe add in more competition in terms of that goalkeeping position. And I know there's going to be a lot of jokes talk about how, looks like the Red Bulls are once again trying to use a call for help from their affiliates in order to get some decent player, and therefore that's why they were able to get this loan deal done. But we shall see whether or not if he is going to maybe be the starting goalkeeping position. And the starting goalkeeping position for the Red Bulls is a very interesting one, because I think there's like a three-way or even a four-way battle right now to who could potentially be the starter of that team. It will be interesting to see on opening day. Is it going to be Janssen? Is it going to be Ryan Mera? Or is it going to be Carlos Corona to potentially be the starting goalkeeper for the Red Bulls on opening day? Now, the Philadelphia Union was another club that made a signing this past couple of days, but this signing, we kind of knew it was coming. They, of course, officially acquired Stuart finally from Kimmerreck just a couple of days ago, and the reason why I say we knew this was coming is because they've been pretty much linked with this guy, and even just a couple of weeks ago, there was reports that they were pretty close in terms of reaching the agreement, and therefore that, of course, is the case. And yeah, I think he would definitely add some more depth in terms of that back line. And I don't want to say he might be a Mark McKenzie replacement, but we shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case, and whether if he's going to slot into that same role that Mark McKenzie used to be for this Union team, or is he going to be just add some more center back depth in terms of this Union team. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, and now talking about some of the reports from these past couple of days, we got Toronto FC winger Jeopardy Marshall Rudy has been linked with top European teams such as Bayern Munich, Juventus, and both Manchester club. And when I first heard this rumor, I actually had no idea who this kid was, and it turns out he was actually a 16-year-old kid coming out of the TFC academy. And that when you are linked with some big clubs like Bayern Munich, Juventus, and even both Manchester club, that he is definitely a very hot prospect. Now, I'm pretty sure that we won't know in 2 years whether or not if he's going to get that same interest again. And by the way, he is 16 years old, so he's not eligible to move to Europe right now, because I don't think he has a European passport right now. And under FIFA rule, you have to be at least 18 if you are going to be moving Europe if you don't have a European passport. But it'll be very interesting to see whether or not if he's going to be linked with those clubs again, and it'll be even more interesting to see whether or not if he is going to get some game time with this TFC team. I mean, I feel like in a couple of years we could really be hearing the name of Jeopardy Marshall Rudy if he's going to be such a hot prospect for this team. And that TFC is not going. I think TFC, as much as I know they are pretty stacked in terms of their roster, don't be surprised if they are looking to try to maybe get some of their youngster a chance to play for their team. And I have a feeling if they think that he is probably one of the hottest prospects coming out of their academy, they will think about playing him, and he would potentially be in the senior roster as soon as maybe even next season. Now, Austin FC has reported to sign Slovenian defender Zane Kluminic, I think that's how you pronounce, and apparently he came from NK Maribor, and apparently I've also heard that there is reports saying that they're pretty close in terms of signing this defender, and they're about to pay $1.8 million to NK Maribor in terms of signing him. But yeah, this should be a decent signing for Austin FC. He's a 20-year-old Slovenian defender, so a relatively young defender that could potentially add some more depth in terms of this Austin FC backline, or maybe even potentially be a starter for this team. I mean, this backline for Austin FC is starting to shape to be a decent backline heading into the expansion year, but obviously it doesn't hurt the fact that they're going to add more depth in terms of that backline, especially add a guy that they feel like maybe he could be a young prospect, and he could be a player that could potentially replace some of our older guys in that Austin FC backline, and a player that instantly I can think of that he could be potentially a replacement is Matt Beasler down the line. Now, Columbus is set to sign Romanian midfielder Alex Matan, and I think a couple of News of the Week episodes before I talk about how he was actually linked with NYCFC, and then all of a sudden the Columbus crew decided to kind of hijack this rumor, and now it seemed like they might even hijack this deal and trying to get Alex Matan away from NYCFC. And if you're an NYCFC fan, that has to be a big kick in the stomach. The fact that one of the player that you've been linked with and potentially be an Alexandru Mitrita kind of replacement for the team is now going to be linked with the defending champion. And the defending champion, we already know that they already have a very stacked squad. So the fact that they are looking to try to sign this guy away from a team that desperately need to have a player there like Alex Matan to potentially replace the quality that Alexandru Mitrita left with NYCFC. Yeah, I mean it just feels like Columbus is getting richer and richer, and it's just kind of ridiculous the fact that they have continued to boost their team, even though we know that next year they're going to be once again a very competitive team and looking to defend their MLS crown. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next news is that the New England Revolution have announced that they are going to allow fans back at Gillette Stadium and allow a limited capacity coming into this upcoming season for the Revs. And if you're a Revs fan, that is definitely great news to hear that you can now finally allow to be back into Gillette Stadium and watch your team play from there. And it's also great to see that there's a lot of these MLS teams that have already think about potentially opening up their stadium and have limited capacity in their stadium for this upcoming season. Obviously, I'm hoping that by the time when we get to the middle part of this upcoming season, we'll have every single team to have limited capacity or even full capacity in some stadium around MLS. But I have a feeling in order for that to, of course, happen, that also means that these California teams also have to have limited capacity. And I know California has the most restricted kind of protocol in terms of potentially reopening, and that I haven't heard any news whatsoever of them even thinking about reopening sports stadium, even though I have heard there are some California sports team like the Padres, the Dodgers, and even the Giants have been pushing to try to allow fans back into the stadium. But as long as if the states are not going to allow fans to do so, and as long as I have not heard any reports that they're getting even close to allowing fans back into the stadium, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a wait, and I won't be surprised that these California teams like the Quakes, LAFC, and the Galaxy might be the last team to actually have limited capacity in terms of welcoming their fans back into the stadium. But now, moving on into the last news of this News of the Week involving CBS Sports, who have recently acquired the rights to broadcast USA World Cup qualifying games that is playing outside of the US and Mexico. And I think this has got to be great news for a lot of fans, knowing the fact that, one of the biggest frustration for these past couple years is the fact that when the US does play against Honduras or Costa Rica or even another team in CONCACAF that is an away game that is not played in Mexico, we can't watch it, because the fact that it's on BN Sports, and not everybody has BN Sports if they of course pay cable. Well, now the fact that CBS Sports basically acquired this right, and I know a lot of people have already got that the CBS Sports CBS Sports network, or actually it's not called network, it's called Paramount Plus, that have already have the rights in terms of broadcasting those Champions League games. I feel like a lot of people will be happy that they're now also finally going to have the access to watch the U.S. play a World Cup qualifying game that is not being played in the U.S. or Mexico. Although in my case, you know, since I've already have BN Sports and I don't have CBS Sports right now, this is kind of bad news for me, because now I can of course watch the U.S. play a World Cup qualifying game that's played outside of the U.S. and Mexico if I don't have Paramount Plus. But I'm thinking of potentially getting it in the future, so I can not only watch the U.S. play against teams that is in the Central American region that is not a home game, but I can also start getting access of watching some Champions League game and don't have to rely on those knockoff streams that I use in terms of watching these Champions League game. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for this week's news of the week. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these news? And as always, if there's any news I didn't mention here on the board, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.